Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. My name is Arlene Sachs. This is Sally Ann Sachs. And today we're going to talk about the most exciting weekend we've had, most exciting week I've had, exhilarating week spent over in Bad Arolson in Germany doing genealogy research. And I just can't stop bubbling about it. We were visiting this place that's shown in back of us, which is the International Tracing Service of the International Red Cross. And this is just the main building. There's a lot of it. And you want to tell a little bit of...
Well, what the story is that even while the war was still going on, in about 1943, the Allies realized, A, that they were going to win, and B, that they had to have some mechanism for reuniting families because people were so dislocated by the war. So they started a tracing service, actually, in England early on, and different groups had responsibility for this tracing function until finally in 1955, they turned over you have a slide showing who the various organizations...
First it was the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Forces, ran it from 44 and 45, and then UN Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, then the International Refuge Organization, the High Allied Commission for Germany, and finally the founding of the International Commission, that's the ITS.
Yes. What it is they asked the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva, Switzerland, to run it for the Allies. And they set up a council. Originally there were 8 countries represented, and one representative from each country. They chose Bad Arolson for a very interesting reason.
Yes.
Bad Arolson is this charming little village, looks like almost like a movie set, doesn't it? With this huge palace in the center. That was the sort of Nazi central, is what it sounded like. The count from the palace was the head of Buchenwald, and the training school, the SS, was located in Bad Arolson. And at the end of the war, the Allies picked Bad Arolson, they said, because the telephone and telegraph lines were still intact, and they were close to the British, American, and French zones of occupation, but I was also told that it was done as a little twist of the knife because of the SS. And that's where these archives that they use in trying to reunite families have been gathered.
And they were supposed to answer letters, and to a certain extent they did. But as we found out, they didn't do such a terrific job always.
No, and you have a slide that shows they've added 3 new countries. They added Poland and Greece.
Well, let's look at it. Belgium and France were involved, Germany and Greece, Israel and Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Poland, United Kingdom, and finally the United States.
Right. And Germany, as part of war reparations, pays the total bill.
So they pay all of their salaries and stuff like that.
Right. And so this has been closed, and it's been aggravating. People could send letters, but it took years to get answers, and there's been a lot of pressure from the U.S. mainly, actually from Paul Shapiro at the Holocaust Memorial Museum. I think he should get a Nobel Prize. He really caused it to be open last November.
And what happened then is that Gary Mogotov decided to end you.
No, Gary did not decide. I have to insist. It was my idea.
Okay, between the two of you,
yes,
you got this going. You went there, you talked to him, and here's a picture of the 40 of us gathered here, all excited and ready to
roll. We're standing on the steps of a house next to our hotel.
That had nothing to do with them, and these people are wondering why.
And the next day, they put a big table up there at the top of those stairs, so we couldn't do it again.
But it did give us a really quick, wonderful picture of everybody that was there.
What we didn't say is that I asked Paul Shapiro if we could bring a group to Arolson, and the reason I asked is that although the Holocaust Museum and other places are copying the files at the ITS, it will be they have some of them, but it will be not until the end of the copying cycle that the files that I think are the most important for genealogists will be available.
Yeah,
and we don't want to wait 3 or 4 years.
And we're going to look at one of those towards the end. Those are called TD files.
Right.
Now, this was, you want to introduce
This is Reto Meister, who is the director of the ITS. He's a Swiss national. By law, by the organization of the ITS, the director and deputy director are Swiss. And so he's the man who took over and just opened it up, and as you know,
turned things around. And we heard from some of the people working there that had worked there for a long time how very different the atmosphere was.
Well, you know what an open, friendly man he is.
He was very lovely.
Right.
He was,
And as he explained, the purpose of the ITS, their mandate is to is humanitarian primarily.
Yeah.
And you wrote down what it said.
Tracing missing persons and providing certificates and reports on the
You don't have the rest of it. Detention and persecution of Nazi victims and their families. So you've heard about the slave labor documents and the forced labor documents.
All of these, they have
people who applied for restitution needed proof that they had been prisoners
and they have over 50 million index cards. Just the index cards that are telling them to look at a dozen different other places. So I have a few slides here that they might want to show of the index cards in this room, just filled with index cards.
And my name is in it, and probably yours too.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody who ever wrote to them has an index card.
So these are then, we were right next to, some of the computers are right next to this room, so we were constantly
Right. What
sort
they
of
did
looking
was they digitized those cards. But what they said was, if you notice that the back of the room, the files get up so high, they had to stand on ladders, and they thought it wasn't safe. They really realized they had to stop using the cards, and they digitized them.
Okay, let's look at the types of records that they have there, because that's going to be of interest to anybody wanting to do it. First of all, it's the prisoner records, the concentration camp records. An identification of most of the time.
The thing to remember is they do not have records on everybody who was in the Holocaust. They only have records on people who came into the recording system in some way. So they have pre-war records, wartime records, and post-war records. But you had to be somewhere where you were where you were counted or registered, something like that.
Somebody asked me, do they have records of those people that hidden people? And I said, no.
Of course not. Nor do they have records of the people who they rounded up and shot in a pit.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And the people who were taken off the train at Auschwitz and sent straight to the gas chamber. They didn't make a list.
And they also don't have the records that the Russians captured. So
mostly they don't.
So some of the eastern camps' records are very sparse.
Yes.
And a few of the people were a little bit disappointed because of that. They have personal effect records of what they took.
That was very special for you.
And yes, I will show that because that really blew me. And they even showed a few actual personal items, wedding bands and stuff like that they had.
That came from one concentration camp. Yes.
They have the labor assignments. They have death certificates, and I questioned about that because somebody said, "Well, can you give me a death certificate?" And they said, They didn't say that, and I noticed on some of mine that where it says verschollen, which means missing, that there was a handwritten note under it. Nobody is known to have come back from this place. So we'll look at some of that. They have the DP camps, which of course are very, very helpful to anybody.
That's the most helpful, aside from the so-called TD files, which stands for tracing documents. The TD files are files that ITS created when somebody wrote them a letter asking about somebody. The DP camp files, I've got they took interviews of these people, the so-called CM1 things, and photographs, and they're just huge. They had to tell all their family members and how they're related and where they're going. You have an address in the U.S. or then it was Palestine.
Yeah.
And they're quite valuable.
And then they also have lists of arrivals in camps and transfers between camps, medical records.
How many head lice somebody had.
And just all sorts of things like that. Now, going back just a year and a half, barely, November 30th, 2006, they had 140,000 letters waiting to be answered.
Right. Many of them never opened. Sitting in envelopes that hadn't been opened.
They're the philosophy, let's say, of the person before that say, well, let's not work so hard, we'll work our way out of a job. And so they just dumped the letters and didn't pay attention to them. And now he has worked very hard. Mr. Meister has worked extremely hard and has gotten his people working very hard.
Well,
and as of right now,
I asked them, because they've eliminated the back, and I asked Mr. Yost, the head archivist, how they did that. I said, were you working 24/7? What were you doing? Were you running a sweatshop? He said, no, we just started to work, which is really rather devastating.
And there's a picture of you at the with our helper.
Yes.
Monica Schultz was her name, and you were looking at something. And in the background is another one of our researchers, Tom Weiss.
Man was in a French jail when he was 6 years old. He and his mother were caught trying to escape over the Pyrenees. And he told me that it wasn't so bad, he said. The cook, they let him run around the kitchen, and on his 6th birthday, the cook carved him a boat out of soap and stuck a stick in it for a mast.
Yeah,
and he remembers that.
He mentioned that.
Yeah.
I didn't remember where it was, but in back of him is the helper working him, and she also worked with me.
That's what they assigned, one employee for every 2 of us, which was astounding. I mean, we can't say too much about the cooperation we got. It's night and day.
They worked so hard. I felt so sorry for her because I should say that.
No.
Okay. Well, anyway, she had a personal problem, and yet she spent her whole time there with us.
She was wonderful, and that was quite amazing. The people who work there told me over and again how wonderful it was that we came, that for the first time they understood what their work was about. They didn't feel as if they were working in a vacuum. They said, we never talked to anybody. We never had anybody to talk to.
Well, it's just a name. It's just a piece of paper. And now they could see us reacting.
Well, you know what I recall? I was there. I was invited to take a tour by the previous director. I remember the head archivist, Mr. Yost, who was quite an outgoing fellow, being very quiet. The director ordered him to find me Schicklgruber's index card. You know who Schicklgruber is?
No.
Hitler. That was his real name. They had an index card on Schicklgruber. And I remember Mr. Yost very quietly getting me the card. So you've got some, you were talking about how they organized us, that they...
Okay, once, what you saw was Sally Ann's, last picture of Sally Ann sitting there, and then they split us up into 2 groups in order to take us around the facilities to show us the original documents, or which buildings housed which documents. And the first one we went into had the concentration camps, and this particular one says Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, Brindonk, and Buchenwald. And Buchenwald was, of course, big, and it continues on there. And these things, which you can't really see from this picture, are these long shelves that are movable, like you see in some huge libraries. And
archives. It's an archival thing.
It's an archive. This room must have been 30 feet long, and they had all of these things, and the
thing to say is, in the era before computers, they really devised a system that organized these scraps of paper so they knew where they were and how to find them. They were not so responsive, maybe, but they really kept
They kept their own records. Very
well. They kept ITS organized this very well.
And this is a sample page of what you might look for. And of course, these papers are 60, 70 years old now. And that's the archivist there pointing out, not touching it, but pointing out to some of the names and so on there. And this one says the death book from December 19th, 1944 to March 25th, 1945. And then these numbers on the bottom are their reference numbers and where else to look and what shelves.
Did they show you the one where the people died every 2 minutes?
No, I don't remember.
Oh, they showed me that. That was in honor of Hitler's birthday. They took a bunch of prisoners on Hitler's birthday and just shot them every couple minutes.
Okay, this is another room, and you can see these archival boxes, just one after the other, And this is just one shelf, and then right next door to it, there'd be another row like that, and another row like that, and another row like that. It was just incredible how much
material they have.
And this was the second building that we went to, very innocuous-looking building, and there's just that little tiny black thing that you see in the above the car.
With the entrance.
The entrance, and this little tiny sign that said ITS. So they're not blasting their name all over any place.
when I went the first time, the former director said, "You must understand there are a lot of widows of SS officers in this town, and they're not very happy that we're here."
Yeah, well, we saw a few old people around. And didn't you say, they told us that the main industry of the town is nursing homes?
Yes, it's become a assisted living and nursing home. People are retirees are moving there.
But it's a beautiful place.
It is.
And this is just another example of the records and with some kind of identifying numbers on them. These are obviously from Austria.
Only somebody who reads German knows that Österreich it means Austria.
Well, I'm telling you.
Fortunately, we had 5 people on the group, or 6, who spoke some German.
I counted 10. I counted more than that.
Really?
Well, I would say there were 5 of us that could really speak it, and then others could speak a little bit and pick it up from the
Many
other.
of the group were children of people who fled or who had been in camps, and there were about 3 survivors themselves. A large group of that.
Peter and Tom and
Bilford.
And so there were a number that were very small children. I mean, they couldn't have been too much older because they really would have been too old to travel.
Right.
And there were some grandchildren. There were some younger people doing research, certainly on their grandparents. There's just another room with file cabinets instead of the boxes this time. So it just goes on and on. Just to give you an idea of how much they had there. This is the cover of one of these TD files that we've mentioned. And anytime anybody wrote to someone, or wrote to them asking about it, like, okay, this person I didn't write it to, but the ones I wrote to had a copy of the letter I wrote to in English in March 1987. In April, there was a very formal German translation of it. In August, there was the German answer, and in October, I finally
that was pretty good.
But that was at 87.
Okay,
that was 20 years.
That was a different director. Those are the people who inquired.
And there's a stamp on the date, on the time.
Right, and this shows every time somebody handled that file. Everybody who touched that file.
Now what interested me on this, which I didn't know, that's the date of 1987 and 93.
So somebody else wrote.
Somebody else wrote, and I don't know who that was.
Here's what they did. You notice that in that file, they have taken the documents that pertain to that person out of all those boxes that you showed before. They're not back there anymore. They're in here. So that when Yad Vashem filmed in the mid-1950s, there were a bunch they didn't get because they were in the TD files.
Okay.
And I should add, by the way, lest people be concerned, originally the governing council was not going to permit these to be used for privacy reasons. And again, Paul Shapiro came to the rescue and he crafted a compromise. We could see the ones that are more than 25 years old. We actually could see the current ones if they are direct family members.
Okay.
Direct family members can always see the current files.
He would have been my grandfather, great uncle,
right.
My grandfather's brother.
Right.
So I really wonder about that.
I found that was very valuable for me because I found in these TD files other people with addresses who were interested in the same person I was interested in, and that gives me leads. Now I'll go to those people.
Now I haven't. They just digitized all of those for me, so I haven't gotten as far as the R's and trying to look at them even. I got to see, what was more recent, and I don't remember seeing anything. A letter from somebody in 87, so I've got to look at that.
Okay, so here
this
you have...
is the one that really blew my mind because it's the closest related to me personally. And this is my father, and this has to be when he
What was his name?
Arthur Astheimer.
Yeah.
His profession was, in second line, it says Kaufmann, which is a merchant? Salesman, merchant, angestellt, employed somewhere. And this is the date he was born. He was born in Fulda, and he was brought into the concentration camp on 11/11/1938, which is the
day after Kristallnacht.
The morning after Kristallnacht. He was from Frankfurt. He was released on the 18th, so he's there only 1 week, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was going to the addresses shown above. He had on...
so this list, is a list of
the clothing he was
effects,
wearing.
Personal effects.
Personal effects. He had a hat on. He had pants. He had socks. He had a jacket, a coat, a jacket, pants, a vest, a shirt, underpants, a collar, a tie, and gloves, and he also had 2 rings. Now, I think he got all except the 1 ring back, because he always talked about getting 1 ring back, because when they gave him his stuff back, he said, I want my ring, and they said, well, it's in this big bag of, there was this huge bag of jewelry, and they opened it, and his was one right on top, so he got that back.
That was the wedding ring?
That was his wedding band that he had until it was stolen in the hospital. And then it's his signature down in there that's what he received. Then there was a second page with that, had 1 line written in German, and I asked them what it said, and they obviously couldn't read the handwriting either. They said, oh, it just says that he's signing that he got it. That much I could figure out myself, too.
But that I remember when you found that. That seemed that made the whole. That was for the whole week for you. I mean, just
it did. It did.
The pathos. I mean, that they were counting every item he had.
Oh, and he was lucky, and he didn't speak about it until after he was 45 years after that.
Really?
So you can imagine what happened to this man in 1 week. And then I think about these people who spent so long in there. How can they ever
So you mean he was that traumatized from the 1 week?
And he talked about it one time, the year before he died. I was driving the car, so I couldn't take notes or anything. And my mother said that he said things that she didn't know. So that's a... And this is a picture of...
This is us with Monica, our helper.
And she was lovely.
Yes,
she was
born in Bad Arolson.
Oh,
and her father, as she was researching some documents for me. Remember the day she found the document her father had researched?
No, I didn't.
Her father had worked there.
Must have been when you were working with him.
Right. Yeah, and so they became very involved.
Now they also have a lot of non-personal data, whereas we're genealogists, they might not be as helpful to those people. It's various kinds of correspondences. It's correspondences between the SS officers, between the prisons, or
the group that's coming next.
The historians.
I had a phone call the week before we left from a professor who's writing a book on the boys that were released from Buchenwald. There was a little group of young boys released, and he's done an in-depth study of them. And since my adopted cousin was one, he called me and he said, I'm going to be in the first group of researchers going to ITS. I said, no, you're not. We're the first group. So the historians are going. Somebody like that will look in those files.
Yeah. And any kind of concentration camp records, this is correspondence of concentration camp records. So it might be the officers writing to one another, not necessarily individuals. And again, that's the historians are like that. Witness accounts, of course, we would be interested in if you know somebody that.
Right.
The Lebensborn files are.
I looked at those. Those were tricky. You know what that was? That was that
attempt at creating a perfect human being by mating.
By taking children that they thought were going to be.
About having the man and woman mate to raise the ideal child.
Yeah.
And they also have maps of the camps.
They have a small geographical department, but it's important to emphasize that the only method they have for accessing their data is by name. So if you ask for anything they have on a certain town, they can't tell you. It's not arranged that way. But you know that I spent the week looking for everybody.
I think you need to talk about that a little bit. The Schlomovitz.
The first letter I wrote to ITS back in the 80s was, I said, hello, I'm looking for everybody named Schlomovitz from this town called Salatvina. In fact, everybody named Schlomovitz from Marmaros County, Hungary. That was the most densely Jewish county in Hungary before the war, because everybody named Schlomovitz is related to me, and that's the town they came from. Well, obviously, I got an answer back saying, tell us the first name of the person you want, the birth date, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote back and said, if I could tell you that, I wouldn't need you. Well, so this time I did it. It took all week, almost. But you can scroll through the computer, and I should say, they have their own Soundex method, so that every name, and we saw, 849 spellings of Abramowitz they showed us in the folder they gave us. So they bring those all together, and you can scroll down, and on those cards, very often it will tell the town, even though it's not, you can't access the computer there. So I just copied all the ones for the 2 towns that were Schlomovitz. That was
I should say, I ended up with a stack of folders about this big, probably about 200 documents that I want to put in my genealogy program. You ended up with 2 stacks at least that high.
Yes, this is for my retirement project, or as I said to someone,
it'll take you forever to go through it. We just have a couple of minutes left, but when we got there, we got this marvelous little folder. It says Visit of Jewish Genealogists to ITS May 5 to 9, 2008. And this is the folder that I was given. Now, you didn't get it because you have too many and they're still working on it. And I also did not ask for hard paper copies of all the documents if I could read the digital. But this is all of the stuff that they gathered, which is mostly, some of the things, as you said, were in the folder, but mostly the notation, their little notations, which with the little notes like AS colon F183B, which meant something to them and told them where to look for the additional files. So this is most of what I got. And
I should say one other thing before we run out of time. Halfway through the week, one of the members of the group, the group came from England, Israel, Australia. Yeah. We had 6 or 7 from Australia and the U.S. And one of the Israelis said to me, okay, when are you organizing the next group? I said, how about if I help you organize it? But we asked the director if they would permit another group to come because they essentially shut down their operation, or a lot of it.
Nobody else could come and research. We had all the computers.
And he said they would be happy to host other groups, but he thought maybe 20 people instead of 40. So
I think that would be a better number.
So who should go? Well, Australians are never going to have a copy of these files. And one thing we didn't say that's important, when that council voted to open the records, they mandated that only one organization in each country can have it. So in the U.S., the only place that's going to have a set is here in Washington at the Holocaust Museum. Yad Vashem in Israel. Someplace in Poland. The French are fighting. 4 organizations want one. But Australia can't. Yeah. They're not on the governing council. They'll never get a copy.
I want to make sure that this next slide gets on the screen because it's the Arolson homepage, and they can read a little bit about what they do there, or they can go from the homepage, go to press, and then press releases, and they can see a little article about us, and we're really just about out of time. But what I
was going to say is Bad Arolson has a website, and people who want to go should go look at their tourist office. We had a great hotel. There are other options besides that.
It was fantastic, and
even the weather was gorgeous.
Yes, the weather was gorgeous and everything. It's great.